I'm searching for the truth about men and masculinity, and I'm documenting my journey on this channel. And anytime that you're looking for the truth, you risk being wrong. I just get to be wrong publicly, so here is a video reflection on me being wrong. Here's the thesis of this video I posted a few weeks ago. Back in college and graduate school, I was constantly furious at the patriarchy, and my focus was on the harm that men caused, especially at the systemic level. My view of men was shaped heavily by the culture of my academic institutions, which saw men as the oppressors. But when I began to step away from that anger and started questioning the narrative that I'd been taught, I noticed that my social media algorithm changed drastically. And I noticed that that shift in my social media started influencing what I was noticing in my real life. It made it easier for me to see and appreciate men being helpful and protective toward others. In that video, I said that I appreciate men who protect and provide. My intention with that video was to demonstrate how my algorithm changed what I noticed in my real life. But shortly after posting, I realized that I was not clear enough in what I was trying to say. And if you didn't know what my intention was, it sounded like I was implying that men owe service to others simply because they're men. And as if being a masculine man comes with a checklist that I, as a random woman, get to write. Some people watch my video and this is what they saw. Now that I see how men are useful to me, I've decided to care about them. And honestly, if you didn't know me or my intent, that's a fair read. But it's not your job to know what I meant. It's my job to communicate clearly, to make sure that I'm not unconsciously reinforcing the same dehumanizing ideas that I'm trying to dismantle in the first place. And when I miss the mark, it's my job to reassess. Not because I'm flip-flopping or people-pleasing, but because I actually want this channel to be reflective of my growth. And growth requires accountability and self-reflection, even when it's super uncomfortable. It is one of the dragons that I need to face on my hero's journey over here. But it is not one of the cute dragons, it is one of the scary dragons. Hi, I'm Gabby. Welcome to my channel. I am so lucky to have such a thoughtful audience. There are so many people who will disagree with me respectfully and challenge ideas and push back in really constructive ways. Because here's the thing about learning to see the world differently, about unlearning the lens that you were taught to look through. It feels remarkably like walking through one of those mazes in a funhouse where everything is just mirrors. In my case, I'm trying to find my way out of the institutional and cultural misandry that I've been steeped in for the last 15 years. The thing is, sometimes when you're walking through one of those mazes, you just walk straight face first into a mirror. So let's talk about the mirrors that I fully walked into and bonked my nose on. So stick with me as I sit on the floor with the little cartoon bird swirling around my head as I attempt to ideologically and intellectually reorient myself. The way that we talk about male service impacts how we value men. Being of service to others is deeply human. We are tribal creatures. We survive as a species by caring for each other. When babies are born, the way that we check to see if they're alive is to see whether or not they're asking for help. That instinct to reach for care is the most basic human impulse. And the way that we respond to that need is through service. But service is a gift. It is freely given. Exploitation is not. Exploitation is something taken, expected without consent, without care for the person giving it. So in my video, when I said that I value the way that men serve others, I didn't make the distinction between service and exploitation, and that matters. Because when you value a group of people only for what they can do for you, you strip them of their humanity. You see them as workers instead of people, and you see them as tools instead of souls. One of my favorite examples of the type of service that I was alluding to in my last video happened in 7th grade. I was at a new school and I was really struggling socially. My birthday was coming up and I so badly wanted the girls that I ate lunch with to decorate my locker because that was a thing that they did for each other. My dad saw how badly I wanted that and he correctly predicted that that was not going to happen. So before work that morning, he drove to my junior high and decorated my locker himself. He didn't tell me he was going to, he just did it. That is the kind of service that I was talking about in my video. Service that is given freely, quietly, without asking for recognition. Never as a condition for love or respect. By expressing appreciation for masculine labor without making that distinction, I risked sending the message that I value men primarily because of their use to me. And valuing someone only for their usefulness is not valuing them as a human. I have spent 15 years understanding the ways that women and girls are objectified in society. We have a well-developed cultural language for it. If a woman said, "I feel objectified," most women and men know that she's referring to being sexualized or being reduced to her appearance. In gender studies, objectification theory almost always exclusively focuses on sexual objectification. That is the primary way that women and girls' bodies are objectified. And yes, men and boys experience sexual objectification too. And the cultural neglect of male victims of sexual abuse and assault is a form of violence in itself. But if we want to understand objectification through an egalitarian lens, we must also recognize one of the primary ways that men's bodies are objectified: reducing men to their functionality, their ability to perform, to provide, protect, and produce. I have asked myself, why didn't I understand this version of objectification sooner? I have studied gender for like 10 years, and I think it's because in feminist spaces, we tend to equate labor with power. We see work, especially outside of the home, as a symbol of freedom. And I think we often fail to understand how labor, especially outside of the home, can be a cage, especially for men. We tend to miss how dehumanizing it is to ask men to risk their lives, their bodies, and well-being just to be seen as worthy of care. I have read countless gender theory texts that explore how women are dehumanized by being reduced to their bodies. But I have never read a mainstream feminist text that explores how men are dehumanized by being reduced to tools. I think that it's because when you start with the assumption that men hold more societal power, it becomes much easier to justify dismissing their pain. It becomes hard to take male systemic suffering as seriously as female systemic suffering. People like to believe that feminism is egalitarian, but it actually cannot be egalitarian unless it recognizes that women willingly participate in, uphold, and hugely benefit from the very systems that rely on male exploitation. If feminism were truly egalitarian, it would be as concerned with the death gap as it is with the wage gap. So moving forward, when I express gratitude for masculine service, I must be very clear that it is in fact service, because service is human, but service that is not freely given is exploitation. And masculinity, or any human's value, should never be defined by how well the individual is exploited. I could spend my entire life studying the male experience, and I'd still never truly understand it, because I am not male. Masculinity is not mine to define, but it is mine to observe. We all know the traditional script. Men were expected to protect and provide. Those roles were central to how masculinity once was defined. But masculinity is so much more than traditional roles. And telling men that they have to be masculine or women that they have to be feminine is limiting. Rigid gender expectations shrink all of us. I believe that masculinity and femininity are sacred energies, and they show up differently in each person. But here is what I have observed. Both are in service. Neither energy is inherently selfish. When healthy, both masculinity and femininity are relational. They serve others and they serve the self. Like, take the locker story. My dad got up early before work to decorate my locker on my birthday because he knew no one else would. That moment was a perfect example of masculine service. And that wasn't just for me, that was also for him. By doing that, he was improving the life of his daughter, and he was supporting the health of his tribe, which is my family. The problem isn't with protecting and providing. I believe that equating masculinity with protecting and providing becomes oppressive when the expectations are rigid and inflexible. When people say men should protect and provide, we tend to assume that means two very narrow things: physically protect and financially provide. And those can be included of the definition of what masculinity is, but they are drops in the bucket. I don't think that masculinity can be reduced to a checklist. And reducing it to physical strength or financial output not only dehumanizes men, it also limits the full expression of what it means to care for each other. I got a comment on my last video that was like, you shouldn't stick to a traditional understanding of masculinity because it's hurtful to people like me who aren't able to protect and provide for whatever reason. But here's the thing, I think the problem isn't with protecting and providing. I think it's with having too narrow of a definition of what those things can look like. There are so many ways to protect and provide. And I'm going to reverse Uno that comment and say that that comment is a great example of protecting and providing. You are providing feedback to me, which is providing a kindness, because I care about doing right by my audience and staying consistent in wanting to unlearn my biases. And you are being protective, looking out for yourself and for the people who might have felt a jab by my clumsy phrasing. Traditional ideals of masculinity only become a problem when they aren't expansive. In my video, I spoke about visiting a friend and that we walked around a new city and he was so aware of my comfort and safety that I could completely turn my brain off. I said I appreciated that. And a bunch of people are like, well, did you do anything for him? And I was like, oh my gosh. To express appreciation for that moment without explaining how I reciprocated it, it made it sound like I was just out here enjoying the benefits of a man's sacrifice without caring about him as a person, which is the literal opposite of what my channel is supposed to be. So great job on that one, Gabby. To finish that story, yes, I always keep a note in my phone, and whenever someone mentions their favorite food or candy, I put it down just so I can remember it. So I picked some of his favorite candy up and I wrote a note to go along with it, and I hid it somewhere in his house so that he would be able to find it later. That was me protecting and providing for him. And to me, that was an act of femininity, because I believe that women and femininity should also be in service of others. We should all protect and provide for each other in the ways that we're capable of, and that's going to look different for everyone. Protecting and providing should be human traits, not gender-bound roles. When we teach that only men or only masculinity should work to protect and provide for others, we are not encouraging care, we're institutionalizing exploitation. Because service, by nature, must be freely given. The moment it's demanded, it ceases to be service at all. Men do play a critical role in protecting women. Whenever I'm in public, I'm always going to feel safer when I'm with a man that I trust than I ever will when I'm with a woman or by myself. I'm sorry if that's gender essentialist, it's also true. But the key is that that doesn't mean that men don't need or deserve protection too. Let's look at this brilliant comment. Socializing masculinity as the default protector-provider is oppressive because when men have to be the default protectors, there is no one protecting them. This is also what makes them a lot more vulnerable to emotional abuse, assault, and trauma. As a trauma therapist, I can tell you that is absolutely correct. When we teach boys that it's their job to protect others and that they are not entitled to protection and that they are not allowed to protect themselves, we make it harder for them to recognize when they are being harmed. I've worked with so many men who have stayed in abusive households or toxic relationships or violent environments, not because they weren't in pain, but because they believed that it was their duty to endure this treatment so that they could shield everybody else. And while I do believe that masculinity includes the willingness to face adversity and to stand firm in virtues regardless of the external world, masculinity is not about the willingness to be abused or exploited. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Masculinity becomes exploitation when it's treated as obligation instead of identity. Even when it's praised, even when it's appreciated, exploitation is still exploitation. Here's the issue, in my estimation. As a society, we've radically reimagined what girlhood and womanhood could be. There are public campaigns, institutional support, educational initiatives, all encouraging girls to value themselves, to set boundaries, and to succeed. Boys have not had that. There hasn't been a widespread movement telling boys, you are more than what you can do for others. They have not been told at scale that their emotional life matters. They haven't been taught that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt them. And that's where we as a culture have totally failed. A lot of people can really not tell the difference between caring about men and hating women. And that's something I'm trying to bring awareness to with this channel. And it's why I also needed to make an entire video unpacking what I got wrong last time. Because this isn't just a Gabby problem. This is a cultural problem. There is a belief in feminist spaces that men have always been treated as full human beings and women haven't. But here's what I'm now beginning to understand. Men haven't been treated as fully human either. It's just that their dehumanization looks different. Let me leave you with this. I love being feminine. I love doing traditionally feminine things for the people that I care about, but only when I want to. I have a relative who fully expects women to serve him in a traditional feminine way. He'll make direct eye contact with me across the room at a family party and hold up his drink and be like, "Can you refill this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm happy to refill it." With poison! But if I'm with a man who sees me and values me for more than what I can do for him, Oh my god, I'll go full 1950s. I will rouge my cheeks and tie a ribbon in my hair and make you dinner while you smoke a cigar and watch football. That is the difference. Service given freely is love. Service demanded is dehumanizing and exploitative. I know how to speak about women's rights and women's issues in a way that would make every woman in the room nod along. I have spent years in those conversations. I've been immersed in those frameworks. I know how to tell those stories. But when it comes to talking about men, talking about their pain, their dignity, their unmet needs, it becomes trickier because in our culture, we don't have the same social permission structure for that. There's an analogy once that I heard about racism that stuck with me. It says that an ongoing cycle of racism is like a moving sidewalk at the airport. You don't have to actively walk forward to be carried in a certain direction. And I think that idea applies here too. Even if you care about men, even if you consider yourself an ally, you can still accidentally end up standing on that sidewalk. You can still accidentally echo a culture that dehumanizes men. And that's what happened in my last video. I did not give proper weight to the fact that men have not had the same social advancement that women have had. People take female systemic pain far more seriously than they take male systemic pain. And by not properly acknowledging that, I accidentally ended up unconsciously reinforcing the literal exact narrative that I was trying to challenge. I wasn't walking fast in the wrong direction, but I also wasn't walking against the current. So the current carried me. It is really hard to speak about men in a way that properly centers their pain. It feels really socially unsafe. But I made this video because I think that's what we all need to do more of. We all need to recognize our blind spots and course correct and begin to see men not just as protectors or providers or problems, but as people whose service deserves appreciation, whose needs deserve respect, and who are just as worthy of protection and care as women are. It is hard for me to try to figure out how to properly frame male pain in a way that's egalitarian, because I have only understood these issues through a feminist lens, and the feminist lens does not center the male experience. But culturally, we're starving for a new narrative, so I'm gonna keep trying my best, and you know what? I'm gonna keep crashing into mirrors because that is how you find your way out of the maze. Thank you so much for watching. You guys are amazing. Seriously, I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next video. Also, I've gotten a few comments lately where people have been speculating that I've only decided to become an advocate for men because my looks are fading. So if you could please like and subscribe to my channel as quickly as possible, time is running out, and I'll see you guys soon.